Welcome to the Food Professor Podcast, episode 33. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Sylvain Charlebois.
Well, we're back on the mic together. So much going on, Sylvain. And in fact, you and I were actually quoted, I think for the first time in the same article yesterday. So our worlds collide again.
Yes.
Right? A first, talking about supply chain. We'll get to that a bit later. And we're going bananas in this episode over our great guest, Julie Francouer from Fairtrade Canada.
That's right.
And of course, we also have our new popular segment, Trying Stuff. So we've got a great product today to try. Little preview. We've got Levin's Water, bespoke gin with Fitch and Lead soda water. We'll talk about trends around all that, and then we'll do that as a separate segment. But let's jump right in. So hot off the digital press, new research from Dow with your partners from Cattle, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
More than 2 in 5 Canadians have changed their behavior to save money at the grocery store. And I see switching behavior. I see substitution behavior. I see format changes. I see Albertans leading the country in reducing consumption of meat. That took me that took me by surprise a little bit. What did you learn? And tell me about the study.
Well, first of all, as you and I, we go into a grocery store. It's a bit of a lab for us. We walk around, we observe. But we were wondering if Canadians actually felt the same. Are they noticing something different? Are they noticing higher food prices? And overwhelmingly, 86% of Canadians actually have noticed that prices are much higher than 6 months ago. And so that's one thing. The other thing that we've noticed that was really interesting is that the older you are, the more likely you have noticed that the prices are higher.
Huh.
The younger generations, like the millennials and the Generation Zs, they've noticed, but not as much. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that, and I teach to young consumers myself, and they know something is going on. They know the prices are moving. However, they may also appreciate why they are moving and why we're slowly departing from this era of cheap food, cheap calories, really. And because you and I, when we grew up, I mean, it was all about buying whatever's on sale, really, at the grocery store. And it was really about cheap food. We didn't know it then. In the 80s and 90s, it was really about cheap food. But now it's different. And we are expecting the average household to spend not 9-10% of its budget on food, but more like 12, 13, 14% in a few years from now. So that shift is being felt, I think, across the board. The other thing that I thought was interesting with this new study is that for the first time, we actually asked questions about shrinkflation. You and I, last time we spoke, we chatted about shrinkflation, but we want to know whether or not people are actually noticing. Are you noticing smaller packages, but prices aren't moving? And 3 out of 4 Canadians have actually noticed that shrinkflation is actually happening, which is more than I thought. So, and in that report, we also asked Canadians about, the usage of flyers, the usage of coupons, whether or not they're actually buying discounted products at the last minute. If the best before date is like today or tomorrow, are they going to be buying the Enjoy Tonight products, things like that? And absolutely, I mean, a lot of Canadians have actually changed their ways of buying food overall in a grocery store, which is really, it's about hedging, right? It's like about hedging against inflation, and you want to save a bit of money, and people are taking advantage of it.
Well, it's about being a savvy consumer. And you also mentioned this upside, so to speak, of shrinkflation is that, it might reduce the package sizes to something that creates less waste. I mean, we probably buy too much in too big a size. You and I have talked many times on the podcast about how much are you wasting. You've done research on how much consumers are wasting. So I guess the upside is, I mean, when people are buying closer to best before dates, that's good, right? Because after a best before date is passed, that's not going to be sold. That's going to be thrown out. And there's probably nothing wrong with it, right? In many instances.
I don't know how you see it, Michael, but the way I see it is that the grocers are, I think, trying to empower consumers to become better food rescuers. You remember
Huh.
a few months ago we interviewed Lori Nickel from Second
Mm-hmm.
Harvest. I mean, her business is about food rescuing, but now I think because of this food waste agenda, the food industry is actually empowering because of food inflation, obviously. The industry is starting to empower the consumer to become better food rescuers overall, giving food a second or a third life, I guess. And it's quite timely because as we exit this pandemic, we're more food literate. We know more recipes.
Yep.
We
Yep.
can explore, try new things, and it's not like I remember in 2014 when beef prices went up 25% in a month, people walked away from the meat counter only for like a month. And then, of course, prices kind of stabilized and we all went back to our barbecues and we all ate meat. But this time around, I mean, the market is a bit different. People can actually walk beyond the meat counter and do other things with different
Hmm.
ingredients.
Interesting. And let's talk about the role of government a little bit, because the best before date is a federal government mandated
Yeah.
regime. Now the government's taken the approach recently of we better do a better job educating people what that means. In other words, just because it says that in your fridge, don't throw it out on the next day. But for retailers, they really can't put a best before date product for sale after the date that's marked on it. Is there a role in government to kind of start tweaking that program? Is it even the wrong language? I mean, how do we even get our heads around that?
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever spent time at the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, but I mean, risk aversion is rampant at the
Right.
CFI. They do
Yeah.
not want to talk about this. They want to limit risk as much as possible. But I'll tell you what, I mean, on October 1st in Toronto, there's a new restaurant that's going to, not a new restaurant, but a new store, which will be opening up. It's pay what you want, pay what you think is worth a food store. I think the name of the store is Pay What You Think Is Worth. That's the actual name of the store. And I can't remember on which street, but it's actually opening up on October 1st. You walk in, you buy what you can, what you want, and then you pay with no prices. You pay what you think it's worth. And a lot of these products, well, the expiry date is very close, and
Mm,
so it's going to be interesting to see if that becomes a popular trend. I'm not sure it will be successful because grocers are actually doing that already, and the food industry is
hmm.
trying to do that already. But
Yeah.
there's all sorts of things happening all at once. Flash food, different app getting you to buy products
Yep.
like that.
Yep.
So it's happening quite a lot more than before.
Mm.
Yeah,
Of course, I wish them well, but I don't know about that one because I think it puts a lot of burden on consumers. There's a
you
reason
wouldn't
we don't.
go.
Well, I don't. How much is it? I don't know. Do I give you $1 or 20? Like it's too much. I have to think too much. Like there's a reason why we don't haggle anymore, right? There's a reason why fixed pricing came to be the dominant model is because I don't want to have to think about what that's worth.
But
I
and the Canadian culture is not about negotiation. I mean, we actually our
no.
culture is makes money a taboo topic. We don't know how much we earn. It's not okay to negotiate. You know, at the gas pump, it's all there. It's all figured out. You either want it or you don't. In other parts of the
Yeah.
world, it would work.
Very different. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, to pull in an analogy from a very different source. Remember Future Shop and Best Buy, right? So Future Shop format for electronics was you'd go in and you could haggle a little bit, right?
yeah,
The men and women there were on sales commission, but the Best Buy format was we'll just educate the salespeople and it's a fixed price. Maybe it goes on deal, maybe it doesn't, and that won
yeah.
out in Canada and the U.S. by the way too. Future Shop went away because people
It,
just say, just tell me how much, just tell me how much it is, just tell me how
exactly.
much.
And on the other end, to flip things a little bit, in the car industry, you remember Saturn? I mean, Saturn was
Right.
exactly about a fixed price.
Yeah.
And we all know when we walk into a dealership, we have to negotiate,
Got to
right?
haggle. You don't feel like you come out of
All
there.
the
Yeah.
time. That's the
Yeah.
culture in that industry. Saturn came along saying, you know what? No haggling. This is the price. If you don't want it, walk away. And they actually closed. It ended.
Yeah.
It didn't work.
Well,
It worked for
you
a
know,
while, but
it's interesting because I sometimes call it the gamification of retail. High low pricing is basically gamification, right? It's like it's
yeah.
fun. back again to a different format. JCPenney in the States tried to go everyday low price, and people just stayed away in droves. They wanted the excitement of a coupon, a big deal, a hot deal, even if somehow they knew, you know what, that's pretty much what I should be paying for it anyway. Anyway, it's a good discussion
Oh
about
yeah.
consumer behavior. Let's talk about the ugly little app that could. QR codes. I see them everywhere now. I remember 5 years ago, there was this funny meme, should I put a QR code on my packaging? And it was kind of a yes, no thing. And it always ended in no. It was very funny. But now I see them everywhere. Now you've highlighted some issues around they're doing a great job, QR codes, for a variety of reasons. I was in a restaurant in Kingston, and you pop it in and you fill out the, contact tracing stuff. But are you concerned about
Did you have a
privacy, or
problem doing
you've
it?
read something? No,
No. Now, a lot of
no, not
people
at
have
all. It
contacted me and said to me, I always have some issues with QR codes. They don't work for me. My phone doesn't read
mm,
them properly. There
mm.
was one friend of mine who's a restaurant expert. He told me that he went to a restaurant and read the QR code, ended up on the Hyundai website.
Would you like to buy? Would you like a car with that appetizer? Uh,
Exactly.
well, I,
Yeah.
I I think advantage to the big companies, right? So I was at a big chain restaurant, and it's seamless. I typed in my information, texted me back a code number that I gave to the woman at the front. Seamless. Same, by the way, in Ontario, we were checking in with passports, so we don't actually have a passport, but I have my vaccination on my phone. Everybody's asking. You couldn't get into the restaurant with it. Didn't it created a bit of a line, but everybody was cool. So far so good, I think, from even that perspective. But anyway, let's talk about privacy. Do you have any concerns around, other than functionality, around QR codes and the data they may be collecting?
Yeah, so the Canadian Press actually called us for an interview about QR codes, and I did say I'm not a privacy cybersecurity expert. You may want to talk to someone, and they did actually. So in the
Hmm.
article, there is a cybersecurity expert quoted, and I actually think that that QR codes are highly vulnerable to piracy, and it can be an issue because you can actually trick them. You can actually change them. You can get a QR code very easily. And so certainly the beauty of QR codes is that it can contain a lot of data, way more
Yep.
so than UPC barcodes, which is great. Even double layered UPC barcodes, they're great to contain data. When you think about transparency, when you think about making the entire supply chain more transparent, a lot of companies are embracing blockchain technologies now. I mean, if you want to offer a portal to consumers, QR codes are perfect for that. If you want to tell the story of your food, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, you got to think about, okay, well, are we exposing the entire supply chain to more risk? If you like, just thinking about what happened this summer with GBS, with the $11 million ransom. I mean, this is
Right.
certainly a real issue. Cybersecurity is a real issue for the food industry. So I think it's great. It has potential, but we also need to be careful about cybersecurity issues.
Yeah, and
But
for the listeners out there that may not be aware, GBS was held ransom with ransomware, cybersecurity, and their systems were locked out. Food producer, food processor, and eventually
and
paid
they paid a
$11 million.
ransom of $11 million. It
Yeah,
worked. That's the
yeah.
worst part.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
far beyond the scope of this podcast, but this is the downside, severe downside to cyber currency, right? Digital currency is it's the currency of
yeah,
crime.
yeah.
And China's realized that. They're cracking down on that, and I think eventually, North
Are you
America is going to have to regulate it.
into Bitcoin, Michael?
No, not really. I mean, I don't trade anything I don't understand what moves it. Like you might as well just go to Vegas. Like I watch it go up and down, but I don't understand what drives the up and down. I try to, I at least try to notionally understand what's going to drive success or failure in a stock or bond or whatever. I just, and maybe I know I'm missing out on opportunity, but or
Hey,
I'm
if you
missing
go
out
to El
on.
Salvador, they'll tell you what's moving it.
Well, now with China banning it and taking it over, and most of the farming going on. Anyway, I don't trade in it because I just fundamentally don't like trading and stuff. I don't understand what
Between
you know.
Bitcoin and the casino, I picked the casino. I can actually have fun.
That's right. That's right. That's right. It can actually have fun. All right. Speaking of fun, our fun news segment, trying stuff. Our fun news segment, trying stuff. And on this segment, we're getting into alcohol and libations and all that stuff we have from our friends here in Ontario, Levenswater Gin. So this is a Levenswater sent to us. My friend Paul Allenby sent it to us. There it is.
Yeah,
It is a bespoke Ontario-made gin, and as you and I talked off mic, there's lots of amazing gins. I'm sure lots made in Nova Scotia. We happen to be trying this one, and we're
absolutely.
mixing it.
Yes,
We're mixing it today with Fitch and Leeds tonic water, which comes in all
that's
kinds
right.
of different flavors. So a bespoke tonic water. So why don't we give it now?
It's from South Africa.
It's from South Africa, so
Yeah.
global trade. So why don't we crack one open? Now we're recording this later in the day, so we're not doing morning drinking here. Let's just for the listeners, if they're wondering.
Let's hear this. There we go.
Oh, there we go. A little bit of that. Now I've got my gin, so I'm going to do a bit of a bartender pour
Gin.
here.
Yes.
Yeah,
You like my
got our gin.
bartender look, Michael, for today?
You're well dressed for our occasion there. I did a bit of a bartender pour, which is kind of fun. And by the way, for those listening on the podcast, this is all on our YouTube channel, as is
Absolutely.
our conversation. So be sure and tune into that. All right. Well, let's give Levenswater a taste. Cheers.
Cheers. Yes.
You know, I have to admit, I never liked gin. I grew up. I
You
never liked
don't
gin.
like gin?
I
Oh my
didn't. I
God.
didn't like gin. I did not like gin until these gins came along. So it's got a flavor to it, right? It's got a nice botanical flavor. It's got rose
That's
hips and
right.
34 other things. So
Yeah.
this isn't our father's gin, right? This is now a class of gin. It's very refreshing.
It is refreshing. Yes. Thirst crunching. I like the kick from the gin for sure. I actually happen to like gin. I'm not a
Hmm.
big fan of tonic water, but tonic water goes so well with gin. So it makes for a really lovely drink. This is nice. It's very refreshing.
It's refreshing. It's light. And we should talk about this whole tonic water thing. This is a Fitch and Leeds. There's other kind of
Yep.
bespoke. I mean, that's happened recently where everybody says, well, listen, this is so much of the drink. Let's improve. It's kind of like, when I go to restaurants and I see them put cheap bread on the table,
Yes.
those who put bread on the table still. And I'm like, why would you do that? You charge me $50 for a main, but you're putting like cheap bread up the scale up, and this kind of quality.
I know.
And it's probably a good opportunity for us to talk about all the things that are happening in the beverage category. I mean, when you and I were growing
Well,
up,
before you go, actually, I just want
yeah,
to also inform the listeners that there are other types. There's
huh?
also grapefruit tonic, which I
Hmm?
tried it, which is actually not bad either. It's a very good. It's a um, very good sparkling drink as well. And so there are a few flavors. So thank you very much for
Hmm.
sending this along. By the way.
Yeah, thanks to Levenswater and Fitch and Leeds, and we should remind the folks that we're under no obligation to do these reviews. People just send us the stuff, and we try it, and that's trying
That's
stuff.
right.
Um,
Exactly.
we should probably talk about in this trying stuff segment what's going on in the beverage category. When you and I were
Good
growing up,
idea.
we had a choice of Labatt Blue or 50, right? We didn't have much
Room
choice,
temperature.
uh, and it often was in stubby little bottles. And there's so much choice today. I mean, I've just got a few bottles I just pulled. You've got your big category, your pre-prepared, ready to drink mixed drinks. This is a Negroni. You've got that. You've got bespoke, beers taking over. And you remember that these categories were seen as kind of also players. They weren't seen as big
Sorry.
players, right? Yeah, no problem.
So is it
They
my
weren't
phone? Yeah, I'm just gonna.
at, at arm's length.
Sorry.
That's just the media
You gotta
again
be able
calling.
to.
It's the media calling. And then, of course, we should probably talk about this: cannabis infused beverages.
Have you tried
Um,
it?
Cannabis infused beverages, yeah, I've tried a few of them. Um, you know, it's hard to get a good taste. You got to have a good tasting beverage, right? I mean, that's where it's difficult. I know initially there's a lot of enthusiasm around cannabis beverages, but they're really netting out to be 4 or 5%. I mean, they're not as big as everyone hoped they would be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think they're a slow growing category. In the cannabis sector, 50% is still dried flower, and the rest is all
Yep.
these different things. But as you sit back and look at it from your chair on the growth and the changes, it must be pretty interesting to watch this kind of explosion of choice, because it actually gets back to what we were talking about in the podcast. You've got so much choice, so many changes. The small players become big players become smaller players, and there's room for niches. Maybe it instructs us to the future of food in some small way. Yeah.
I think so. The beverage industry is really, really important in Canada, but it's a really competitive category. You're seeing some CPG companies dumping some brands, as PepsiCo did with Tropicana, for example. You're seeing some consolidation, but at the same time, you're also seeing new innovation. You just presented a few very, very interesting products, and there's going to be more of that happening. We just had the pleasure last week to be in Montreal at Cial, well,
Mm,
virtual Cial, and we were talking about food innovation for the entire morning. And the beverage industry is bound to do very well next few years because it's a category. It's portable. There are different flavors you can explore. There's always something
yeah.
new, whether it's cannabis or new ingredients you can actually incorporate, and it's a nice way to introduce new flavors. It's a very passive way to introduce new flavors in the marketplace in Canada.
And I guess the COVID era has been tough and kind at the same time, because I know for a lot of these bespoke liquors, like a gin, a lot of their business was in bars, and of course bars just went away for
Yep.
a year, so it was very tough days. Wine as well, but now the direct to consumer is picked up. You can buy both Levin's water and the tonic water online. They'll ship it to you directly.
Yep.
That's very, very new. That's very different. And I guess we should talk about the making at home, because again, similar to food, we never made in our house bespoke cocktails. We weren't really a cocktail family. We were beer and kind of wine. If we had a cocktail, we'd go out to a restaurant. Now we have, cocktails Friday night, and we never used to do that. And that's, I have to say, almost 100% because of COVID. And we decided to just try to create and make our own interesting cocktails, made easier when you've got some pre-mixes and
That's
some
right. Yeah,
different things, right?
the industry actually is again empowering consumers to do their own little things at home. What kind of cocktails do you prepare on Friday nights?
Well, I would take this gin, and I actually make a product. I was on air with Ben Mulrooney making it together, of all
That's
people,
right.
and I made the Last Request cocktail, named after my YouTube food channel. And we put in the same Levin's water, but then we added in Dutch hot peppers, peppercorns, and grapefruit. And it really
Mm,
is like a G&T on steroids, but it changes the flavor entirely. Let it sit for a while, and it's got it like it fires up the tongue and the lips. Just a delicious kind of cocktail, but all kinds of different beverages, And it used to be just a glass of scotch, right? You pour some scotch in. And we should talk
exactly.
about supply chain. I mean, this is a nice kind of segue into one of my last couple of questions. Global supply chain, how does it affect food? I know there are types of whiskey from Ireland. I go to Ireland quite often, and you can't get them here anymore. They're 9 months away. They just cannot get them at all. And you're saying that's Ireland, so it's this traffic jam knock on effect. Why should we care from a food perspective? I know a lot of our food comes into Canada, but mostly from North America, right? Or
Yep.
am I not thinking about this clearly? How big or how important is the supply chain troubles to what we eat or find on our shelves in Canada?
Well, you know this, Michael, very well. I mean, the disruptions are pretty significant, and the concern that I have, and I suspect that you share the same concerns. It's how long this is going to last. The fact that it's costing more to transport food because of the fact that there is there is a shortage of labor. I actually listened to your interview with CGOB in Winnipeg, and you used the analogy of a car wreck, and I
Mm.
think it's a really good one to get people to understand what's actually going on. It's a car crash on a very busy highway. And you're stuck, and so your whiskey is stuck somewhere. It's gonna get to your destination, to the destination, but it will take longer. And that's kind of what people are experiencing. Restaurant operators, retailers, they're ordering stuff and they only get half of their order. And so there's different ordering strategies happening because they know they won't get everything. And that's why now you're hearing different companies encouraging people to order for Christmas, like right now. If you want to order an Halloween costume, it's too late already.
Mm.
I mean, I actually looked into it for my daughters mid-September, and it was all of the costumes they wanted. It was either out of stock or they were going to get them in November or something. So you can, as a
It's
consumer, you kind of have to pace yourself a little bit. Is that what you're hearing,
yeah.
Michael?
Yeah, very much so. And I think the year will be governed by substitutions. So in your example, you may not be able to buy a costume, but you can probably buy some makeup and DIY a costume. And maybe, the consumers' willingness to substitute, I think, will be the hallmark of our years. How long is this going to last? I think 2025 is my bet.
Whoa.
Not
Wow.
at the
No, I
same,
was
not
actually thinking 2023, but 2020, why so long?
Well, not at the same intensity, but if you look at nations like the entire continent of Africa, they're not projected to be vaccinated until the end of 2023. At
Oh,
if all
so you're
goes
looking at
well.
the virus. You're looking at COVID. I'm looking at capacity. I'm looking at
Yeah.
labor, particularly.
Well, I think what's
Uh,
happening, one of the things is whether it's Vietnam or China, they get an outbreak, they shut down ports, they shut down factories, and it won't always be at this level. But Vietnam's only 30% vaccinated. The continent of Africa is like 4%. So how much stuff do you source from Africa? It's just this domino knock-on effect. So I don't think it's going to be like this. I think this will resolve by the end of 2022, like a traffic accident. But
yeah.
as people take detours and other things, I think we could be dealing with it in one way, shape, or another through to 2025.
And that's
I
why, I
see
mean,
that.
last week I had a talk with some investors in Montebello, and they asked me about logistics, global logistics, what's going on. And I actually do think that nearshoring and onshoring are going to become more
Yeah.
popular. I suspect many companies will be enticed to think differently about their supply chains, and they'll be
Yeah.
thinking about getting their distribution, getting their processing closer to home instead of
Hmm.
buying whatever in Argentina, get it packaged in Malaysia, and consume whatever you're producing in Canada. So
Yeah.
and to add to what's happening with logistics, you have to also consider in the Western world the effects of um, of pricing carbon. I mean, pricing carbon
Yeah.
is going to wreck the economics of global supply chains. So companies won't have a choice but to reconfigure how they do things overall.
Well, it's going to be a very dynamic time. We're going to have lots of chance to talk about it over the next number of episodes. I think for time, let's leave this episode where we are today. We got lots of stuff to talk about. We'll have more guests coming up. Don't forget another shout out to our listeners and viewers. Check out the YouTube site, and for the YouTube watchers, check out the podcast.
Cheers to
And
our listeners.
cheers to our listeners and viewers. That's right. Thanks to Levin's Water and thanks to Fitch and Leeds for today's proc. We got some cheese coming up. Just a bit of hint. Our next episode will have some bit of
Yes.
cheese.
Oh, I'm looking
So
forward to that.
looking forward to that. I like me a
From
good
our friends from
cheese.
Lactalis, right?
That's right. Cheeseworld.ca, which is their direct-to-consumer site, and Lactalis together. But
Yes.
I won't. You'll see it. Some very good niche flavors. Anyway, enough about that. We'll talk about that next episode. For now, if you like what you heard, you could subscribe on Apple iTunes, Spotify, your favorite podcast platform. Please rate and review. Be sure to recommend to a friend or colleague in the grocery, food service, or restaurant industry. I'm Michael LeBlanc, producer and host, the Voice Retail podcast, and a bunch of other stuff.
And I'm the food professor, Sylvain Charlebois.
Sylvain, have a great week. Enjoy your beverage, perhaps later in the week as well. And I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Take care, Michael.